Flowers are the showstoppers of botany. They're the delicate but sensuous pinnacle of a plant's beauty. And various people around the world have worked out interesting recipes for using flowers in their food and drink and in beauty treatments, as well as enjoying their decorative and aromatic qualities. A herb in flower is preparing to reproduce. In the center you'll find stamens covered with pollen, or perhaps pistils, or in the case of a flower like the Madonna lily, both together. It's called botanically the perfect flower. To entice the pollinating bees and butterflies, a flower offers color, fragrance, and nectar. And of course, we too are the beneficiaries. Most culinary recipes use the petal part of the flower, and these calendula, or English marigold, although they don't have a distinctive flavor, can visually transform any green salad, especially seen glossy with French dressing. I've always had a soft spot in my heart for these orange petals because they were my introduction to edible flowers. You can also macerate the petals in oil. This means soaking them in a scentless cooking oil such as sunflower oil or sweet almond oil for about 2 weeks to yield a very healing substance, and this oil is very useful for skin ailments like rough or chapped or cracked skin. When picking chamomile, again, the whole flower is used for teas and hair rinses. And also in borage, the whole flower is used, although for borage it's important to make sure you remove the bitter calyx at the back, because that doesn't taste very pleasant. And then you're left with this beautiful blue star. This pretty daisy flower is called pyrethrum, and when it's dried and powdered, it makes a useful insecticide. You can dry the flowers yourself and grind them up to make this powder and use it just to sprinkle around plants, and it'll give you some measure of protection, but it's best if it's in solution. Now, you might wonder why so many books tell you that pyrethrum is an insecticide, but no one tells you how to use it. And that's because the powder doesn't dissolve in water. It has to be, first of all, dissolved in alcohol. And if that's a little bit tricky, you can buy a prepared mixture ready and then just dilute it as per the instructions. And it's a good idea if it's mixed with a soapy solution, because that helps it stick to the leaves better. And make sure you spray both the tops and the undersides of leaves, because many times these black fly and green fly tuck themselves into the corners. There are herbal flowers for eating in salads, for cleaning our skin, for soothing our nerves, and for making fragrant gifts. And this is one flower that has all those uses. This wonderful, deliciously scented rose is Albertine. And if you want to use one in a recipe, it's very simple. You just pick off a petal and nip the bitter white bit at the base off. And it's quite tasty. There's recipes for roses in soups, meat dishes, jams, jellies, desserts, Turkish delight, and even crystallized as cake decoration. Then there's rose water, which is a wonderful skin tonic, and rose hips, which give us vitamin C. And of course the rose oil extracted from the petals, that most precious of substances used in many expensive perfumes, and in aromatherapy massage is particularly healing for women. Rose petals are also the basic ingredient of potpourri. classic way to retain the abundance and fragrance of a summer herb garden is to dry the flowers and leaves and make potpourri. The ingredients can be basically classified into 4 categories, and the most important of these is the flowers. And top of the list is the rose. This is the apothecary's rose, and when you want to dry petals, just take them off and lay them out singly so that they don't turn brown, and put them on newsprint or muslin, and they'll dry in about 2 weeks. The second most important flower is lavender, and the reason these 2 flowers are so important is that they both retain their scent once they're dried, and not all fragrant flowers do that. Just hang lavender up in a bunch, and when it's dried, rub the flowers off when you want to use them. Another lovely flower that keeps some scent is the mock orange, Philadelphus, with that wonderful fragrance so reminiscent of high summer. Some of the other flowers that you can use for fragrance are pinks. Try and get the old pinks that have that sweet clove scent. Honeysuckle has some fragrance when it's dried, but it doesn't keep the really intense smell that you get in high summer. You can use these lovely little heartsease violets. They don't have the same scent, but they give a beautiful intense violet to your mixture. Then there's flowers for color, and this is where the blues really come into their own. The most special are the wonderful delphiniums. You can dry those in bunches hanging upside down as well, and then just separate the flowers when you want them. There's also the blue of this viper's bugloss, a wild plant. There's the red petals of the bergamot, a very intense scarlet. It's the leaves that have the scent. The flowers don't have much scent, but you do get this wonderful color. And again, the color of the marigold, the calendula, gives you that rich orange petal that's nice in citrus blends. There's the white daisy of the lawn chamomile. Again, it's the leaf that has the scent, so don't expect the flowers to give you that wonderful apple scent, but you do get that lovely texture. And the second group is the aromatic leaves from the herb garden. This is a range of some of them, and you can see how we lay them out on muslin, and it allows the air to circulate and they dry better. This is the bay leaf with that lovely nutmeggy smell. This is golden marjoram, and marjoram just gives a nice savory edge, takes away a cloying sweetness if you put it in some mixtures. That's the resinous leaves of rosemary, the clove-scented leaves of the purple basil, the variegated apple mint, sweet myrtle, which has that wonderful orange spicy scent, and the purple variegated sage and gold sage. Most of the leaves and flowers you can get in a concentrated form in essential oils. This is very precious rose oil, lavender, ylang ylang, bergamot, and they can be used to touch up a flagging potpourri. Now the third category of ingredients are the aromatic seeds, spices, wood chippings, and citrus peel. Coriander seeds, which give a lovely warm spicy flavor. It's a good idea if you want to use spices in your potpourri to buy them whole and grind them up yourself, used in a pestle and mortar, because it releases that fragrance and it's much stronger than if you buy it already powdered. Then there's also vanilla pods, very unusual and very strongly scented. Cinnamon sticks, which you can either crush up or leave in quite large pieces for a nice bit of texture. These are shavings of sandalwood, and these are mixed wood shavings. There's rosewood, cassia, and cedar in there. All very, very lasting fragrances. And it's quite easy to dry your own citrus peel, lemon or orange or a lime, and just take a zester, scrape off some shavings and dry them on a cloth for a few days. Now the final ingredient in a potpourri mixture is the fixative. These are substances whose heavy molecules evaporate very slowly, and because of that they somehow restrict the movement of the molecules of the other scented items, which retains the scent for longer. There's benzoin or tonka beans, which are these black creatures, which are very hard and you practically need a hammer to break them up to use. And this is orris root. That's a whole root dried, and that's powder, which is the more familiar form that you buy it. Usually orris root is the preferred fixative because it's very pleasant, sweet violet scent, doesn't interfere with the perfumes that you've already assembled, so it's usually the chosen one. So that's all the ingredients assembled for your potpourri. And then, like the mistress of the still room in the 16th century, you have the leisurely pleasure of blending your ingredients and creating a mixture to suit your mood or the season. This is a mix of English flowers from a cottage garden. It's got roses and lavender, delphiniums, and orange blossom. And when you've mixed it together and you've got the scent that you want, you might find you just want to balance the color scheme a little more. For example, I'd like to see a little more blue, and these are dried delphinium flowers, just to finish that off. Then this mixture is a citrus blend. It's got lemon verbena leaves, a few mint, and the dried citrus peel. And I've also discovered that lemongrass dries very well, which you can get at the supermarket now. Just chop in a little of that. And I think for color, just to add a few more calendula or English marigold flowers, just to give that bright orange color. When you've made your potpourri, there's other things you can do with it as well. You can fill tiny sacks and put them in drawers, in hems of winter coats when you're going to put them into storage, wherever your imagination thinks you'd like a little more fragrance. Making herb pillows, I think, is still one of the nicest things to do. You just fill a muslin inner slip, because then it means it can be taken out to be washed. And I save lace and doilies when I find them in second-hand shops, and I sew the doily on one side and a piece of plain cotton on the other. And they make a wonderful gift for anyone who's ill. And another lovely way to use your flowers is to put them in a tea cozy. Just sew a pocket inside your tea cozy, tuck some lavender or lemon-scented leaves inside, put it on your teapot when you've got your herbal tea brewing, and as the warmth of the teapot permeates the flowers, you get this lovely scent of lavender floating through the house.
Every year it gives the heart a lift as you come over that hill and you see this great sea of purple spread out before you.
Henry Head runs Norfolk Lavender, the last large commercial lavender farm in England.
Well, and then obviously you've got the different sorts of lavender. The pink lavender we don't in fact use for commercial purposes, it's just a garden variety, but it is very popular. The most important thing of all is a light, well-drained soil. The one thing that lavender really dislikes is having its roots surrounded with water. So if your soil at home is clayey and heavy, get some shingle and builder's sand and mix it in the trench so that the plant can really, the water can really drain away from the roots.
To get the maximum perfume, when's the best time to cut the flowers?
When all the flowers are fully open.
Can you show me
yes.
what?
That one is getting on that way. These ones here, where it's gone brown, you see, there, those in fact are over, but the plant is still making some oil. Those ones there are about to come out. That one, those flowers are fully open.
So it's a sort of compromise.
It's a bit of a compromise, but in about 4 or 5 days' time, all of those ones that are now about to come out will be out.
And when you cut the flowers off, is that your form of pruning as well?
Yes, the harvester cuts the lavender down to where the stalk comes out of the bush, about there. Mm-hmm. And that is about as far back as you need to cut the bush each year.
Down to old wood? Is that,
yes, yes, down down sort of this year's growth. Now, obviously, when the bush is still growing, it will grow through that vigorously, and so the following year you get a bigger bush. It doesn't stay the same size each year. But after about 7 or 8 years, it reaches its full size, and it won't grow very much bigger than that in succeeding years.
For us on a domestic level, would it be better if we just cut some flowers and left the major pruning for later on?
Yes, it is very much better for the plant if you can cut the flower and the stalk off anyway by the end of August.
Oh.
Because it gives it the whole of the autumn to recover, and it puts on much more vigorous growth and stops the plant getting woody. And don't be frightened to cut. I mean, a lot of people sort of just cut the heads off and leave those bits of stalk and they go dead. You want to really cut it down to there.
Be vigorous.
Be vigorous.
Be brave.
Be brave. Yes, you won't damage the bush. Well, shall we go off and look over here then?
Yes. Several different varieties you grow. What's this one?
This one is our main field variety. It was a variety that we bred ourselves. It's a heavy oil yielder and particularly suitable for this soil.
It's a beautiful colour.
It is. It's a lovely colour and you get lots of flowers tightly packed.
How much oil would you get from a big bush like this?
Not a lot, really. I mean, it's enough for about 4 or 5 bars of soap, a bottle of lavender water.
Lavender water. I think that's still my favourite because it's so refreshing and it lifts the spirits. If you're collecting lavender flowers, cut the whole flowering stem and dry it in one piece. Then if you want the individual flowers, you can rub them off later when they're dried. It's a lovely coincidence that flowers reach their greatest beauty and have the highest proportion of active ingredients at the same time. That's just when they first fully open. So that's the best time to pick them. Choose unblemished flowers of good shape because distorted petals can mean that there's damage from pests or insecticides or even a virus. The best time to pick them is in sunny, dry weather at midday. And it's a good idea to lay them out individually in a wide, open basket or loose if you can, because then they won't sweat and discolor so quickly. Sonia Beresford Hobbs carries on the tradition of making flower posies or nosegays using traditional herbal materials. These aromatic posies, or tussie-mussies as they were called in Victorian times, are another tradition that's being revived. I recall reading that judges in Tudor times used to take disinfectant posies into court with them so that they wouldn't get jail fever.
I also make them for liverymen in the City of London for their election day.
And besides being disinfectant and aromatic, they could convey a secret message because each flower and leaf was thought to have a special meaning.
Yes, absolutely. This is a bridal one, which one starts with a pretty rose in the center, which is a new dawn rose for love.
And the idea is that you have a circle of contrasting leaf shapes and colors.
Yes.
And you've got sage for domestic virtue.
Yes.
Pineapple sage.
Lovely, isn't it?
Mm. And sweet myrtle, that's love, of course, Venus and all that. And Shakespeare's rosemary for remembrance.
Yes. And variegated ivy for fidelity, which I always make my brides have. Right. Now we have a get well, tussie-mussy.
Ah, lemon verbena. That's a wonderful idea to put lemon verbena, that lovely fresh
Such a
scent, into
wonderful, clean
something
smell,
for
isn't it? We start off in the center with a red geranium for comfort. Thyme for courage. Lady's mantle or Alchemilla mollis for protection.
And you've got chamomile for energy and adversity.
And fennel for strength.
And then lemon balm for sympathy. What could be a better message for a hospital?
Wonderful. Right.
Now
That
you're
one.
going to show us how one of these is
Yes,
made.
one for a baby.
Lovely.
So, really, I try and lay things out so it's easy to pick up as you go along. Start with a fairly straight one in the middle. This is a particularly pretty miniature rose. Then I would surround it with 3. In fact, they're variegated mint, which is quite pretty.
And the mint is for virtue.
It is. I hope I haven't put peppermint in. It'd be a bit young for that, wouldn't it? Perhaps I'll use this.
Whenever I try it, I
Time.
end up with a cone shape. I find it very difficult to get that nice, flat, posy look.
It's quite easy, really.
This is marjoram for blushes?
Yes, that's right. It's a rather sweet thought, isn't it, for a baby?
I just think it's a lovely idea for a mother and baby to receive something like this,
Yes.
which again is aromatic as well as so pretty.
Then we could put a row of pink sweet peas in.
Sweet peas for delicate pleasures.
It's a nice thought, isn't it? All rather delicate flowers for this tiny little baby.
I'll have one of the sandwich. Would you like a sandwich?
Choose a flower.
Salad.
Edible flowers add color, texture, and sometimes delicate fragrance to a wide range of dishes. A salad with the stunning colors of the flowers of nasturtium, bergamot, and pansy, and calendula and yellow rose petals mixed with tom thumb lettuce. Clove pink tartlets and cream cheese scented with pinks.
I'd love a glass of wine. Robert. A glass of wine. Love.
Try this cherry soup. Oh, that looks lovely. Can I have some?
In front of you.
Cherry and rose petal soup with sour cream. Flower sandwiches with parsley, plus petals of pinks, nasturtium, or rose, each with their own flavor. Quiche with fresh coriander leaf and calendula petals. Elderflower wine. A mixture of cream and cream cheese hearts, scented with rose geranium, garnished with red currants and crystallized rose petals. Borage flower ice cubes. One of those cherry soups. Do they saving one? Scones with rose petal jam. Layered date, banana, mincemeat, and rose petal dessert. Turkish delight flavored with rose water, lemon, or lavender.
Put them in the middle. Stick it down there.
The use of roots is probably the most neglected area of using herbs. In the past, we had rich, earthy flavors of roots like skirret, the Old English root vegetable. We've had sweetmeats made from the root of marshmallow, and elecampane, early forms of confectionery. And we had an exotic aromatic spice from the root of spikenard, mentioned in the Bible. Botanically, a root has three functions. First of all, it anchors the plant. I'll just dig one up here and show you. In ideal conditions, it would grow a mirror image below the ground as it does above. That's why it's important to allow enough space for a root to grow to its natural size to get the best plant above the ground. Roots are also the mouth of a plant. The tiny root hairs on the end of larger roots take up water from the soil in which is dissolved minerals. Now, it has no ability to select what it wants. It's obliged to take up whatever is in that water. So that's why it's important that you supply the nutrients that are necessary for a plant, and also important to avoid chemicals of poisons wherever you can. The third function of some roots is to act as a storage organ through the winter. And that's where most of our herbal uses come in. This is the rhizome of this Florentine iris, or orris root, and when it's dried and powdered, it has a scent of sweet violets, and we use it as a fixative in potpourri. These are the true roots, these fleshy yellow pieces, and this is the most difficult kind of plant to transplant. You have to be very, very careful because these break very easily. Another famous storage organ is the bulb, and this is garlic, and a single piece is called a clove. If it's beginning to sprout green like this, you could plant it in your garden. It helps keep greenfly from roses and is said to improve their scent. Just put it about 2 inches deep, and because it's a perennial, you can just leave it there and use it when you want. The bulb of this beautiful white Madonna lily contains a soothing mucilage that's used in hand creams. A mucilage is a substance that when the bulb is steeped in water, it comes out and thickens the water. It was originally used to treat epilepsy and in a lotion for bruises. Another plant root with similar properties is the marshmallow. This is a young plant, the same as this with the beautiful velvety leaves. There are over 1,000 members in the mallow family, and all of them contain this soothing mucilage. Once upon a time, it was used to make the sweet marshmallow as well, by boiling it in water and adding sugar. But in today's recipe, the spongy cubes have only sugar in common with the original recipe. The root of this elecampane contains a sweet starchy substance called inulin that was responsible for its popularity as a candied sweet. In the Middle Ages, apothecaries made little pink flat cakes out of this and sold it to people who sucked it for asthma, indigestion, and to sweeten their breath. The size of the leaves give you a clue to the enormous size of this root, but it doesn't grow deeply, so it's not too difficult to dig with a fork or a spade. The Roman writer Pliny wrote of the Empress Julia Augusta that she let no day pass without eating a piece of this candied root, both to aid digestion and to cause mirth. Perhaps the most famous medicinal root is ginseng, that almost legendary root from the Orient. John, so many people in the West have taken an interest in ginseng. Why do you think that is?
Primarily, I think that's because people expect that it will make them live longer. It improves their sex life, supposedly.
John Hall is a practitioner and teacher of Chinese traditional medicine, whose apothecary includes an interesting range of herbal roots.
China has this mystery about it, that people think that if they take things, even though things that are totally unknown to them here, that it will somehow benefit their health. It'll make them more resistant to disease.
Are they wrong in that judgment?
In part, yes. In part, no. Ginseng will certainly increase the body's ability to fight disease, but it has no specific antibacterial or antivirotic actions on its own. So
What does that mean? It doesn't fight
it wouldn't
bacteria.
fight specific disease. It would only increase the body's ability to resist disease over a prolonged period of time. So that if taken in low dosage for short periods of time, it increases the body's what's called humoral immunity. In other words, the body's ability to resist toxins within the cells themselves.
So does it help clean the body out then?
Yes, it would help detoxify, as they say in the West, the system, though it wouldn't do it for specifically high infections. It would only do it for low-grade infections and only over a prolonged period of time.
So our general problems from bad environments and bad food, it would help sort of the general...
Yes. And also reduce stress. Modern stresses mean that, yes, we're living in increasingly more toxic environments, so yes, it would help like that.
That's the thing that I've heard most about it, that it will help reduce stress, and that's the way it does it, is that?
Yes. It does it specifically by increasing the body's ability to rid itself of toxins. So yes, that reduces the stress on our bodies so that our bodies have more energy available to resist specific diseases.
But it's not good to take it for a long time,
Not for
as
prolonged
some
periods of
suggest?
time, no, or in high doses indeed, because what it actually does, it will produce toxic shock within the heart, so it has side effects. Anything that has an action must also have a reaction, and then ginseng does have a reaction, same as any other drug. If you take it for a prolonged period of time, or in high doses, or against what would be medical advice, then yes, of course, it's going to give you problems.
I've brought back 3 forms of ginseng from China and Hong Kong, and I wonder what you think of them, because I think that we in the West don't know how to judge the quality of it. And this is a root that I bought in China. What do you think of it?
It's a good quality root. I don't think there's anything wrong with the root. What I object to is, and what's hidden by the label, is the fact that they've cut off the top of the plant, and that's totally unusable, which would make up, on a root this size, something about 10% of the volume of the root.
You mean
so
that section there?
That section there is totally unusable.
And then I've seen packets of these small, thin sticks for sale.
Well, those are immature roots. Those are roots where it takes 7 years for a ginseng root to mature before it's ready for harvest.
When I was in Hong Kong, I bought these pieces, which is the Korean red root, I believe, and they steam it and slice it so
right.
people can just eat a piece.
Really, that's a common way of preparing roots, and that is one way I would use it. And it would be used in decoction. In other words, what they would do is put it into a liquid, usually 1.5 pints of liquid, and boil it down to 0.5 pint of liquid over a period of a couple of hours, and then drink the resulting concoction.
And then these are tablets I bought in London, and they guarantee the
Yes.
quality. But how can we, who are fairly ignorant, make judgments about
Well, you
the
can't.
quality?
Anything in
You can't.
tabular form, you can't actually make any judgment on unless you have it independently analyzed, so that would be an impossibility. What I object to on this jar is it doesn't say any directions on, it simply says take it if you're feeling bad. Well, if you're feeling bad, go see a medical practitioner and find out why you're feeling bad to begin with. Nor does it limit the amount of time that you should take these for. In other words, the implication is you can take these from now until the day you die. And if you took them in high quantities and for a very long period of time, that might be sooner than you'd hoped.
Valerian is a strongly scented rhizome root. It's an ancient medical herb valued by several cultures around the world. And it came into prominence again during World War I and World War II when it was used to treat shell shock and nervous stress. It is a very powerful sedative, strong enough in fact so that you should either consult your doctor or medical herbalist or make sure you're not taking any other sedative medicines. It has a very unpleasant smell, though cats and rats are attracted to this smell. And they say that the Pied Piper of Hamelin carried bits of root in the hem of his coat, and that's how he attracted the rats away. But the very unusual smell is still used to give a musky tone to perfumes today. The roots of many herb plants are happy to grow in a container. In fact, they enjoy the good drainage that provides. And it means if you don't have a garden, either just a balcony or even a windowsill, you can still grow a mini herb garden. I've managed to get 10 plants into this middle-sized window box, and I am a little guilty of cramming. but there's so many I like. And this basil, for example, is an annual, and it means when it dies at the end of this season, it will give more space for the perennial rosemary to carry on. And when you just use it, that will act as a natural pruning, and that'll help keep the shapes in order. One important thing to remember if you want to include mint is to keep it in its own pot within the box, and then the roots won't take over everything else. If you do grow herbs in containers, it means you can move them around to take maximum advantage of the sunlight that's available. And you can also move them where you want to use them. As for example, this rosemary, you could put it next to your barbecue. Or if you're sitting in the sun, this lovely scented lemon verbena, just put it by your chair to stroke. Strawberry pots are quite fun to plant up, and each of the little pockets allows space for the root of one plant. And this is a kind of novelty idea, a lady's mantle with its lovely frill of green leaves. The long flowering stems become more slender and they gradually fall outwards. And when they're in a hanging basket, it gives you crinoline of flowers around the edge. And you often miss that when the plant's growing in the ground. But it's the size and condition of your roots that are the important indication as to when you should move a herb into a larger pot. Basil seedlings benefit from being planted, first of all, in very shallow pots, because in the first stages they put a lot of energy into root production, and the sooner the roots hit the base, the more quickly you start having leaves produced. But pot this on into one size up. Manufacturers do them by different sizes, and that holds twice that. Put crocks in the bottom, which means broken terracotta pot, and the reason they choose that is because usually it has a curve on it which leaves you little air spaces, and it also holds moisture. And I usually put a handful of this gravel as well for extra drainage, and then use a good soil-based compost. Put your plant in the center and top it up with this. First of all, loosen the roots a little so that it's easier for them to work their way into the new soil. If you do too large a pot, then you have the danger that the dense root ball in the center is so different from the loose soil around the edge that when you water it, all the water will run quickly down the outside. In this window box, the roots have just about enough space, but it just shows you how even in a very small space you can get an interesting range of herbs. And if you go for the variegated forms, and for example this is a compact rosemary, you get an interesting arrangement even in a very small space. These seedlings are ready to pot on or put into the ground. This is a form of tagetes, or French marigold. And the whole family of tagetes is giving researchers great interest at the moment because of their ability to fight eelworm, especially the tagetes from South America called Tagetes minuta. Eelworm attack potatoes, roses, and tulip bulbs, and they live in a very hard shell called a cyst, which is chemical proof. And secretions from the root of the tagetes inhibit the ability of the cyst to recognize its host plant, and so they just lie dormant and your plant is offered protection. The root secretions also work to kill 3 very troublesome weeds: ground elder, convolvulus, and they even work a little against couch grass. And you can plant them between your rows of tomatoes because the root secretions also help to protect them from black fly and green fly. This cottagey pink flower has a delicious raspberry sorbet scent that wafts across the garden. It's called bouncing bet or soapwort, and wort is an old English word meaning a useful plant. So you hear of lungwort, pennywort, St. John's wort. The root of this plant, and to a lesser extent the leaves and stems, contains a substance called saporin, which is soapy and detergent-free and can be used to clean delicate skins and hair, and most importantly, rare old fabrics. In fact, museums have been rediscovering this traditional use and are finding that valuable tapestries can be not only cleaned, but have their color revived by using soapwort. It's quite easy to use. You just make sure the bits you want to use are clean, chop them up loosely, just cover them with very, very soft water, boil it for about 20 minutes, then strain it, and just use that as your soapy washing water. This pretty plant with rosettes of leaves is called roseroot, Sedum rosea or Sedum rhodiola. And in Elizabethan times, the root was dried and powdered, and when it was soaked in water, it gave a rose scent to the liquid, so it was called the poor man's rose water. But there's a bit of mystery connected to the plant now, because we can't seem to get the same intensity of rose scent as the Tudor writers wrote of. Perhaps there's a plant in someone's garden out there that still has a stronger rose scent. This is a 2-year-old Angelica plant, and it's high summer now, but if you have a plant and you approach it in early spring of its 3rd season and make an incision just at the top of the root before the sap starts to rise, you'll get a sticky white resin ooze out of your cut, and you can scrape that off and dry it and use it as a fixative in potpourri. It's got a lovely clean smell. Now you've got some other roots here. That's beautiful.
Angelica root, yes, the Chinese Angelica. It is really a lovely root. It's used, traditionally in China, it was used for menstrual disorders.
And this is a Western form of the same root.
That's right, this is the Western version of it. I mean, by comparison, it's poorly prepared, it's immature root, it's not very good quality at all. I wouldn't actually use it. Usually in the West, you get these prepared as chopped root. In other words, they just take the whole root, chop it up very finely. Whereas in China, they separate off the branch root ends from the main root, because the branch root ends are actually abortive, so that you couldn't administer them. You couldn't, in other words, if a woman had anemia during pregnancy, you couldn't give her the branch root ends. It would act as an abortive, but you could give her the main root. So in the West, they don't do that. They simply chop up the entire root and throw it into a bag, so that you can choose that, you can use it, but you have to use it for non-pregnant women. You can't use it in any way connected with that.
So a little knowledge is a dangerous thing.
It can be, yes, definitely.
And what are some of these other roots?
Some of the others, now one of the good ones to start with, because it's a ginseng replacement. This one here is Cotinopsis pilosula, which is called Saidong Sum in Chinese. Because we live in a very competitive, very high-tech society, we're constantly in one form of fight or another, so our adrenaline levels are far too high. So it actually reduces adrenaline and therefore reduces stress.
What's this, called butt K?
Butt K, astragalus or Wong K. It has very similar uses again to ginseng. It is a tonic. It increases white cell count, red cell count. It also increases the macrophages, the body's defensive mechanisms, and their strength and size. So it increases not only their numbers, but the size of the macrophages, so that they're bigger and beefier cells. In other words, they can devour larger toxins. They can take on larger bacteria.
And the Chinese have herbs for cancer?
Oh, yes. Primarily to offset the side effects of radiotherapy and chemotherapy, because their ability to increase white cell count and red cell count, both of which would drop during both radiotherapy and chemotherapy. So they can be used in conjunction with Western medicine for the treatment of cancer in order to alleviate side effects. We would also use them to alleviate nausea, things that the principal side effect people complain about with chemotherapy is the nausea, the fact that their hair falls out, things like that, and these would reduce the side effects of those.
And this is the red peony root, is that right?
Sure, Peony lactiflora, that's right.
Just the common Western peony.
Common Western peony.
Beautiful flower.
Lovely flower, absolutely beautiful plants. Very good antibiotic. It's traditionally used, the Chinese say, because it is red, that it applies to the lower body cavity, whereas the white Chinese peony would be used for the upper body cavity on the old doctrine of signatures, the lungs being white. I don't take any notice of that, quite frankly. I'm interested in their antibiotic properties. They do improve blood flow, especially to the uterus, so it improves localized circulation. It can be used for pelvic congestion, a number of diseases like that. It's a very useful herb, one that's not frequently used in the West, unfortunately.
But it would certainly be an attractive addition to the herb garden.
Yes, definitely. Very pretty.
Ages, salad making was considered an art. And in 1669, an Englishman, John Evelyn, wrote a book called Assateria, a discourse of salads. It was an instruction manual covering the full range of activities, from harvesting the plants, where to find them, which bits to cut and use, what bowls to present them in, and even special sauces or salad dressings to put on them. He covered over 72 different herb leaves, flowers, and seeds, and most interestingly for us here, roots. He suggested the common lawn daisy in the spring because it's a good tonic, and also the root of dandelion. This is very rich in minerals and vitamins, and also when it's roasted and ground, it makes a good coffee drink. And its activity is enhanced if it's served with burdock as well. Another root he mentions several times is chervil root, but if you've ever dug up a chervil plant, you'll know that there's almost nothing there that could be called a substantial root. And it turns out that the word chervil was also applied to sweet cicely. And this is a sweet cicely root of about a 2-year-old plant, and you can see it's much more substantial. And that again was boiled and sliced, and then sometimes pan-fried. And a similar thing was done with marshmallow root. And there's a quantity of sugar in the root, and when it's fried, it makes a lovely caramelized texture to the root. But there are many interesting ways that he suggested that can still be done today of serving a larger section of root. This is cut into julienne strips here and presented with shellfish, little golden marjoram, and radish, which of course is another root. Here the sweet cicely root is grated with carrot and coriander leaves. And John Evelyn also mentions Jerusalem artichokes as a flavoursome root. It's a tuberous root, and this dish has it cooked very slowly on top of a slow oven in a casserole dish, and the mixture it's cooked in is cream and butter with garlic cloves. Really brings out the flavour. Also makes an excellent soup. And he mentioned garlic as a flavouring, though he said 'tis not for ladies' palates, nor those who court them. He suggested as an alternative for a lighter touch, the rocambole, a kind of wild garlic, which has at the moment those pretty purple flower heads which are growing into little bulbils that can also be used for garlic flavouring. One idea is, if you'd like to use more of it without too much of the violence of the strong flavour, these are the individual cloves of this rather lovely colour. Then you boil them for 4 minutes in hot water, and at that time it's then easy to push them out of their skins, just like that. And then you can just mash them with a fork, and some of the heat is gone, but you still get the lovely flavour, and add that to gravies and sauces. Garlic has an amazing range of medicinal uses as well, and it's highly regarded for its ability to prevent heart disease as it reduces cholesterol, and it has strong antibiotic properties. He also mentions horseradish. This is a substantial piece of the root. The easiest way is just to grate it. And if you have Japanese raw fish dishes, you may notice that a portion of grated root is served at the side. And it's important to eat this because it's served for its ability to help kill parasites in your gut that may come from raw fish. But I suppose our traditional way of serving it is in this horseradish sauce made here with cream and a little vinegar. And if you make your own, you get a much more pungent flavour. But John Evelyn saved his highest praise for skirret. This root, he said, was exceedingly wholesome, nourishing, and delicate, and of all the roots, least likely to be windy. He said the Emperor Tiberius so valued it that he accepted it as tribute. This is a Regency recipe, and the skirret has been washed and scrubbed clean, scraped, and boiled, and then it's served with a white wine sauce enriched with egg, and you can see a garnish of Welsh onion sprinkled on the top.